A millionaire in Chicago built his empire with cold precision until one rainy night, a homeless boy selling lemon tarts shattered everything he thought he knew about success. But when the boy's mother stepped through the door, the past came back with a taste he could never forget. This isn't just about cookies. It's about debts that can't be repaid and a flavor that saved a life. Winter wind swept down the cold stone streets of Chicago, scattering scraps of paper and echoing the chaotic sounds of the city. Honking horns, hurried footsteps, and the low whistle of air weaving between skyscrapers. Inside the upscale restaurant Langston and Company, the atmosphere was entirely different, warm, serene, refined, like a world removed from the harsh reality outside. Graham Langston, the restaurant's owner, moved slowly along polished walnut tables, his Italian leather shoes tapping quietly in rhythmic confidence. Every detail in this place reflected Graham himself, meticulous, controlled, and unyielding. From the lighting to the music to the perfectly plated dishes, everything was crafted for Chicago's elite. Graham hadn't come from wealth. Raised in the impoverished South Side, he had once slept in shelters and washed dishes from age 13. But he had never let that past define him. He buried it beneath tailored navy suits and an impenetrable demeanor. Yet tonight, as Graham stood near the tall window overlooking the street, something cracked in that carefully crafted exterior. A young black boy, around 11, stood in the biting cold. He wore a frayed coat and clutched a small cardboard box. He wasn't panhandling, wasn't begging, just quietly holding out the box as pedestrians rushed past. Inside were neatly wrapped lemon tarts, bundled in wax paper. The boy's face lifted toward the window, eyes calm and unervingly steady. His lips trembled from the cold, but his spine was straight, proud. It struck Graham like a memory, like looking through time at himself. "What's that boy doing?" Graham asked, voice low and even. Samuel Ortiz, head of restaurant security, stepped beside him. "Just a street kid selling food. I'll move him along." Graham shook his head slightly. "Not yet." Ortiz hesitated. "Sir, this isn't the place for that kind of activity. It affects the brand." "He's not begging," Graham said evenly. "He's selling something." "There's a difference, Sam." Ortiz said nothing, but his frown deepened. Graham knew that look. He'd seen it too often, when he was just another nameless, dirty child on a snowy night, asking for warmth. Without another word, Graham stepped outside. The cold slapped his face, but he didn't flinch. The boy watched him warily as the sharply dressed man approached. "What are you selling?" Graham asked, voice calm but firm. "Lemon tarts," the boy replied. "My mom made them. For in a box. $3. Graham paused, eyes flicking from the boy to the worn box in his hands. "What's your name?" "Noah." Graham nodded. "Tomorrow, bring your mom here for dinner. A table will be ready. In return, bring a new box of those tarts." Noah narrowed his eyes. "For free." "No," Graham offered a faint smirk. "It's a trade. Pastries for a meal." "Fair deal." Noah hesitated, then slowly nodded. Graham pulled out his wallet and slid a $20 bill into the box. "For this one," he said before turning and heading back inside, leaving the boy blinking in surprise. But for the first time in days, Noah felt a quiet spark of warmth spread through him, not from the weather, but from something else entirely. The following evening, Langston and Company hummed with its usual grace. Waiters moved in crisp synchrony, the clink of glasses like a wordless symphony. But for Graham Langston, this night was unlike any other. He hadn't told anyone, but he was waiting for a boy named Noah and the mother he had never expected to see again. He tried convincing himself it was just passing curiosity, but deep down, he knew it was memory. A memory long buried beneath layers of power and polish. When the door opened, he recognized Noah instantly. Same coat, same quiet dignity, but this time, no box in hand. Following him was a thin woman, likely in her 40s, wearing a long dark coat. Her face was kind but weary. Her name, Celeste Brooks. And when Graham saw her, something inside him froze. She didn't recognize him. Even as her eyes scanned the restaurant cautiously, weighing whether she belonged, there was no flicker of recognition. Graham exhaled, slowly, unsure why he'd been holding his breath. "Hello, kid," he said, stepping forward. His gaze shifted to Noah. "You came." Noah nodded warily. "Wasn't sure you'd keep your word." "I don't say things I don't mean." Celeste nodded. "Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Langston." Her voice was soft, polite, but guarded. "Call me Graham." He led them to a quiet corner table, far from the curious stares. Graham hated to admit it, but he saw them, eyes trailing Celeste with silent judgment. She didn't fit in here. But Noah? The boy sat tall, trying not to look too excited while glancing at the menu. A waiter approached. Graham noticed the hesitation, barely a second, but it was there. "They'll have whatever they want," he said firmly. Once the order was placed, silence returned. Graham folded his hands, studying the woman across from him. "Your son says you bake?" Celeste blinked, caught off guard. "He's still selling?" Noah looked at her, then nodded. "Evenings only. Helps with your medicine." Graham said nothing. He turned to Celeste again. "You used to run a bakery?" She stiffened, then smiled, tight. "I worked at one. The owner was kind. I had dreams of starting my own someday. But after my husband passed, the medical bills, it fell apart fast." She said it like it happened to someone else. Calm, distant. But Graham heard the weight beneath every word. No one helped. "Help?" She laughed, hollow. "People help when it makes a good story. A photo. A headline. People like me, we don't get help. We get tolerated." Her words sliced through him. Not because they were harsh, but because they were true. A week later, Celeste began working at Langston and Company. She wasn't on the main pastry line, nor featured on the menu. But in the back prep kitchen, the one few noticed, she began with quiet hands and careful lemon tarts. Graham never told anyone why he hired her. He simply said, "She bakes well." And strangely, no one questioned it. Celeste worked with silent precision, patience hardened by time. Noah started coming in after school, first just observing, then wiping trays, then quietly assisting. At some point, no one knew exactly when, he began learning how to hold a knife, how to place mint leaves delicately. One afternoon, Graham walked in to find Noah slicing lemons paper-thin under the sous chef's watchful eye. He stopped in the doorway, watched for a moment. Noah looked up. "You think I've got it?" Graham nodded slightly. "As long as you don't lose a finger." It all began to feel oddly normal, which Graham found both comforting and terrifying. Because Celeste still hadn't remembered. Sometimes she'd glance at him like there was a whisper at the edge of memory. Once she nearly asked, "Have we met?" But she stopped herself. "And Graham?" He avoided her eyes. Because if she remembered, something fragile might collapse. Then came one quiet night. Celeste had stayed late to finish a batch of lemon tarts for the next morning's event. The kitchen was nearly empty. Warm light glowed across her hands as she wiped a tray clean. Graham passed by. He paused at the door, watched for a moment, then stepped in. "Working late?" he asked. Without turning, she said, "They weren't perfect yet. I couldn't send them out that way." Silence stretched. Then she turned, facing him fully. "I remember." Graham froze. "It took me a few days. But I do." That boy, quiet, didn't speak, just sat and watched me like he was asking, "Can I trust you?" He didn't deny it. He didn't nod. He just exhaled. "Yes," he said quietly. She stepped closer. "It was you." He nodded. No words passed for a moment. "You've changed," she said. Not accusing, just surprised. "I didn't think. I never imagined. No one expects a homeless kid to run a restaurant." Celeste let out a small laugh. "I'm not surprised you succeeded. I'm surprised you remembered." Graham's voice was quiet. "I owed you a meal. And maybe everything." The next morning, Graham sat alone in his office on the second floor of the restaurant. The coffee in his cup had gone cold, but he didn't notice. His mind was still in last night's kitchen, where Celeste had said she remembered, where he had finally admitted the truth. He had braced himself for that moment, but he hadn't expected the relief. Not fear, not shame, just release. There was nothing left to hide now. And because of that, he knew what needed to happen next. That afternoon, he called Celeste up to the office. She entered, cautious. "You wanted to see me?" Graham nodded. "I have a proposal. Not for this restaurant." She frowned slightly. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were sketches, early blueprints for a small bakery in South Side. "A shop," he said. "Yours. I'll fund it. You run it. And it won't just sell pastries." Celeste sat, stunned. "Why?" "Because once, you helped me when no one else did, and asked for nothing." She looked at him, eyes deep with years. "I don't want to be a symbol. I don't want people to come because they pity me." Graham smiled faintly. "We're not building a place that asks for pity. We're building one that rebuilds dignity. And if it fails, then at least we tried." 3 months later, a small shop named Noah's Table quietly opened on an old South Side corner, once the site of an abandoned laundromat. There was no grand opening, no press, no banners. Just the scent of lemon tarts drifting down the street and a small but steady line of customers. Celeste stood behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, carefully zesting lemon over fresh trays. Noah carried pastries to the front patio, gloves on, his eyes shining under the morning sun. He was no longer the shivering boy in the cold. He was a helper, a morning greeter, a bringer of quiet joy. Graham didn't attend the opening, but at exactly 7 a.m., a small white bouquet arrived. The handwritten card read, "Let the scent tell the story. GL." The bakery didn't make them rich, but every day, at least one tray was set aside for the nearby homeless shelter. Once a week, Celeste taught neighborhood kids basic baking. The curly-haired girl who once tried a free sample now folded napkins and brewed tea. Noah, after school, spent time in the back kitchen, asking about crust techniques or simply watching his mother bake, silent and proud. One afternoon, as Celeste locked up, she saw Graham across the street, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't speak, just stood. "Want a taste?" she called gently. He crossed slowly. "As long as it's still his lemon." She handed him a small slice. He took a bite, nodded. "Still does." Celeste smiled. "Some flavors never leave." Graham glanced at Noah wiping tables inside. "That boy's going further than you think." "I know," she replied. "But for now, he's happy. And so am I." No more words were needed. Only the fading light painting the shopfront, the hush of wind through open windows, and the scent of lemon curling into the old brick, simple, quiet, and exactly as it should be.